open up the meeting.
Zoning Board of Adjustment, Monday, March 25th, 2024, 7 p.m. regular meeting. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 11th, 2023, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Second, on December 11th, 2023, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 11th, 2023, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567, Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and for your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcasts on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Can we have a roll call, please? Mr. Orozco is inbound, I just let you know.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Borello.
Here.
Mr. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Mertens.
Here.
Mr. Roscoe. Mr. Stanton is absent. Mr. Ryan.
Present.
Ms. Scottson.
Here.
And Chairman Saya.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Will everyone please join me in Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Andy, can we please have a swearing in of the professionals?
Yes, Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Just state your name for the record, please.
Charles Cunliffe.
Jennifer Beam. Sherry Spiro.
Your professionals are sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Okay, approval of minutes, regular meeting, March 11, 2024. Eligible voters, Barillo, Hughes, Mertens, Ryan, Scottson, and Saya. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Barillo. Eileen, roll call, please.
Mr. Borello.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Mertens.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Ms. Scottson.
Yes.
And Chairman Saya.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
Thank you, Eileen. Item 6, any vouchers?
No vouchers tonight.
Great. Item 7, correspondence. Any correspondence?
I have one thing for correspondence. Case number BA 2211, Aaron Peeker and Yehuda Brown will be carried to May 13th, 2024, with notice. An extension has been given to the board through the end of May, Mr. Pape, that's fine, till the end of May.
Okay, so if anyone that's here for application number, case number BA 22-11, Peeker Braun, this application is being carried till May 13th, 2024, with notice, extension, the end of May.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, do you know how long it's going to take Jose to get here? Because if he's not here when we start, he can't vote.
We got it. Yeah. It's okay. We're not going to count on it, right?
Got ya.
Okay. Okay, applications before the board. Case number BA 1923 SP, Yeshivas Emek Hatorah, Inc. This is a use variance, preliminary, and final major site plan and major subdivision. Application of Yeshiva Emek Hatorah, Inc. as application seeking use variance, preliminary, and final major site plan and major subdivision approval to remove all existing structures from lots 22, 23.01, and construct a two-story, 23,253 square foot school building with basement located predominantly on Lot 22, but also partially on lots 23 and 23.01. The existing one-story educational facility located on Lot 23 is to remain, and a vertical addition is proposed over the proposed gymnasium on premises known as Block 69, Lot 15, 22, 23, 2301, 395 Kent Road. Expiration date, 27 April 2024. Mr. Pape.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board's professionals, and public, good evening. Kenneth Pape of the firm Heilbrunn Pape on behalf of your applicant. Am I being picked up? Is this working?
You're being picked up, sir.
Very fine,
Yes.
thank you. This is an application for use variance relief, site plan approval, and a subdivision. We were before the board in 2020, and the board memorialized relief to the same applicant for most of the same property in 2021. That relief, the request that we present to you this evening is similar, but not identical to the relief that was requested at that time. Our clients have been successful in securing from their neighbors a contract to purchase additional land. So additional lands are being presented to the board. Our clients are requesting modification of the buildings on the property. The main new building has been reduced in size. The main new building has been reduced in purpose. And the existing building is being repurposed. We're requesting that the existing building remain and that it be primary athletic facilities for the boys who are the students at the yeshiva. That's an attorney's executive overview of the application. The presentation will be made by Louis Zugner, who's the professional engineer who designed the plan. He was the person who presented it to you the last time. Scott Kennel is here. He is the traffic expert, and he too was with us the last time. Melissa Rubb is a registered architect, and she is responsible for the redesign of the buildings. I also have the privilege of being here with Rabbi Weinberger and Rabbi Mermelstein, both of whom are associated with the facility. The last time we Zoomed and we didn't get to see each other. The rabbis are sitting in the front row and with us this evening. The last witness that we intend to call is Christine Cafone. Christine is our professional planner. And I know that we have a lot to cover, and I don't know how far we'll get. I'm ambitiously hoping we get to the conclusion, but before we begin the substantive presentation, if we could just have your attorney or secretary confirm receipt and adequacy of our notices for the board's jurisdiction.
The board has jurisdiction, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pape.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Pape,
Yes.
when we last heard this application, it's the Solomon Schechter is the old building, is that correct?
It is. Yes.
And that's where we gave you preliminary approval to,
Just a use variance, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Just a use
okay.
variance. We stopped there.
and you worked with the professionals.
We worked with the professionals. Before the hearing, we worked with the professionals and the board. A use variance was granted. We did not come forward with a site plan. Our clients went to the neighbors to see if additional land was available, were successful in acquiring same, and were coming in with a revised application. A significant change in the application is there was a goal to increase the student population. There was a goal to have the school grow considerably. And all of the presentation included a building, approximately it was a two-story building, 56,000 above grade and 9,000 below grade. And they were doubling all the classrooms. For every classroom where we had one classroom, we were going to two. There are no new classrooms that are being proposed. There are amenities that are worked into the building to make the school, to make the education more complete, but there is no new classrooms. And you'll hear from the applicant and the applicant's professionals the ceiling on the number of students that will be educated at this school.
And the previous testimony, the students, they were walking across the bridge to the housing on the other side of the bridge, correct?
Yes,
And there was really no relief needed for additional parking or anything, and we talked about visitation and once or twice a year, where there would be three times a year, so that's all still in play, correct?
yes, Mr. Chair, perhaps I could take a few moments to just reestablish some of those factors that this board required of the applicant. They were memorialized in a detailed resolution, and I can also report on some changes that have happened. When we were before you in 2021, the dormitory was under construction. The dormitory is built, and the graduate students, only the graduate students, live in that dormitory. And when we were before you, there was a sidewalk that was supposed to be built that connected that to the school. It's installed. And you may recall, I actually thought it was a humorous comment, who's going to shovel the snow on the sidewalk? And we said the boys will, and the boys do. The sidewalk is kept clear all the time. So the school said, we're building a dormitory. It's there. It's beautiful. The school said, we'll put in the sidewalk. It was a combination of Lakewood County and our clients. The sidewalk is in, and it is being maintained by the boys.
Great, so for the benefit of the new members that are on the board, perhaps maybe if you can give us that
Sure.
overview, we'd appreciate that, sir.
Sure. With permission, I put together notes that I'm going to be using this evening, but I could put a lot of these notes on the record early on. I think some of the statements they're similar to statements that were made when we were before you the last time. But this is a school that educates high school boys, and it also has postgraduate students. Students, the high school boys, there's 28 students in a class. And that's a freshman class, sophomore class, junior class, senior. So there's 28 boys in each of those 4 years. And you'll hear that that's the number that we have had for 10 years. There was this ambition, we wanted to grow. It's withdrawn. There's no interest in growing, no new classrooms. There's also the graduate students. And the graduate students number approximately 70. Sometimes it goes to 80, 70 to 80 graduate students. And these are the students who live in the dormitory across the bridge. The number of staff has been consistent for many years.
Before we go to staff, can you just give us the total number of students instead of expecting the board to do, like, a math problem? Like, how many students are you? You got approval for, what, 380 students initially?
I can answer that question. There's 28 times 4, and 28 times 4 is 112. And the number of students in the graduate school is approximately 70. So we would anticipate that the number of students will be approximately between 170 and 185 students. That's the number that we would anticipate. And we're prepared to commit to this board that we will control the number of students. And if we need to come up with a mechanism, we'll work with the board. But there is a commitment on the record. It'll be, if this is approved, it'll be in a resolution. And we know that resolution will be recorded and will follow the property. There are 25 members of the staff. And unlike a secular high school, the staff is not in place all day. The staff comes to teach different classes during the day. Typically, there are 10 staff members present at any time. There's also the administration. There's a half a dozen people that make up the administration. The yeshiva intends to continue to educate young men in the high school and postgraduate, but has no ambition to grow. Their goal is to create a high-valued education. They enjoy that reputation in their community, and it's the reputation that they want to enhance. They're not looking to grow. We also had gone through the hours that the students were there, and just to put us all in our place, these students come to school at 7:45 in the morning, and they go home between 9 and 11 o'clock at night. That will continue. We also indicated that although meals were served, there's no kitchen, there's no cooking. Meals are served, the foods came from a food service, and all the cooking was off the property, and that will continue. We've indicated that the school day was filled with recreational breaks. That will continue. We're asking to have a recreation building on campus, and there'll be more on that come a little bit later. I already shared with you the success of the dormitory being completed. And then there are these 3 events that take place during the year. There's the parent-teachers conferences. Mr. Chairman, you remembered that accurately. There's 12th grade graduation, and once a year, there is an award ceremony. In recent years, the award ceremony has been moved to the Eagles Ridge Golf Course, but it had been here, and it could return. Those were the 3 events, and you may recall that the yeshiva has a working relationship memorialized in a writing that with a school across the street. The school across the street allows the use of their parking lot for overflow, and that remains in place. So kind of a
I mean, I would just ask the question, you got approval for 380 students. Now you're coming back with a max of 185, but you're not reducing the size of the building at all.
Yes, we are. Building size has been reduced,
I mean, not significantly.
close to 30%.
I don't know about that, but I'm just saying, like, it just seems to me like you're using the enrollment to advance other things, and I guess defer to Charlie, but like,
It has been suggested to me that our clients were looking to avoid the septic system regulations.
exactly.
And that's not the case at all. If it were the case, I would not be authorized to give you the tools to manage the student population.
What tools are you giving us, Ken, honestly? Like, do you think someone's gonna stand out in front of the school with a clicker and like click how many kids come in? The
No.
town is not gonna be put in a position to enforce your enrollment. So, I mean, John, are you gonna stand out there with a clicker? Like, so,
I wouldn't do it with a clicker, and I wouldn't ask the school, but I would
I'm just
impose on-
saying, it just
I'd impose a
seems-
responsibility on the applicant to provide proof of their student enrollment. And I'd like the opportunity to make the presentation.
Oh,
to the board.
absolutely.
100%, but I just wanna put you on notice that there's skepticism on the side of us in terms of whether or not you're really cutting the enrollment as far as you are, because it looks to me like the building is not substantially reduced, and therefore, how does the township move forward to ensure that there's not going to be 380 students there, plus staff, plus this, going into a septic system that is sized for a way lower enrollment? And so, it's incumbent upon you to provide this board with the information that they need in order to ensure that there isn't going to be required to have a township person there clicking the number of students going in, because it's just not going to
I haven't done
happen.
any testimony. I was merely outlining the presentation to the board.
Mr. Pape?
The testimony will follow.
Okay, thank you, Jan. So, Mr. Pape,
Yes, Mr.
so
Chair.
it appears that, yes, we talked about 380 plus students. We were always concerned about the septic system, correct? And that how it sloped back behind the Solomon Schechter building and so forth, right? Are we going to be connecting to primary line? Are we going to bring the line in? Are we going to redo the septic system? That's something that, would probably be, if we can put that up front, what's the plan?
I was about to ask the same thing.
Yeah.
This property is on septic. There's no sewer line that's available. It's not reachable by sewer. So it will be on septic, and it's incumbent on this applicant and their engineers to design a septic system. And we have a comfort level that we can, but to design a septic system on site to service the population that we're presenting to you. If we can't move forward.
Got it. So that will replace the existing one that's there.
Yep, and with the same number of students that are there now and the same number of staff that are there now.
Okay, Mr. P.
Thank you.
Charlie, did you have anything you want to add real quick?
No, so if the board recalls, that was, one of the things that needed to be worked out at time of site plan. I think there was a representation that the existing septic was currently like maybe at capacity for the enrollment that they had, so they were going to have to take that out, put in a new septic system. With the number of students they were proposing as part of the use variance application, there was testimony put on the record that it would be an enhanced septic system. So typically, anything less than 2,000 gallons a day is an individual septic system. That gets approved at the County Board of Health level. Anything above that, you have to go to DEP in the state level. There's an Egyptus permit, there's additional pre-treatment and dosing. It's more waste that's going to an underground system that needs to be handled, and there's additional regulatory requirements that need to be met. So that's kind of, we were told at the time of the use variance that would all be worked out and presented to us at the time of site plan, and now we're kind of here at time of site plan with largely a very similar site layout, and the footprint of the building 2D looks largely the same as what was presented, and the only changes were going back to halving the number of students. So that's, I think, from an engineering perspective, is our concern, is we don't want to see a septic system having issues, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, because it doesn't serve anyone. So.
Thank you, Charlie.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cantor.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Pape, as you go through your review, I'm curious, I'm big on time. We spent a considerable amount of time to hear this case, or to hear this request last time, and we graciously granted what you had asked us for, and now you're asking us to do it again. So I want to know specifically what is different about this plan than the one that we spent so much time to review last time, as you go through your review.
Okay. We'll do so.
Okay, so, septic system.
Well, I think what we would,
So, Mr. Pape,
yes, sir.
so you say you're reducing the building by 30%. Does that mean we're reducing the number of lavatories and number of, drains and so forth? Or we're just adding just gymnasium with no restrooms, no showers? I'm just kind of wondering, where's the balance that Mr. Conliff is talking about with regards to the work, and how many gallons are we going to be generating, per day and so forth? But that should all come out, and comfortably we should be able to satisfy the engineer, correct?
That's the goal,
Okay.
always the goal. And I think some of the testimony about the interior of the building will come from Melissa Rupp, the architect. Some of it will come from Louis Zugner, the design engineer. Lot to cover.
Yes.
And I'll understand, I'll be the first one to say it, and you know that how I feel. I know that you're all volunteers. I know that your time is valuable, and you give it to the community, and graciously is an understatement. You give it to it freely and graciously. We appreciate it. Our clients were able to secure additional lands. Our client's executive board made decisions to approach this project to create a high-end facility and not a high-population facility. That's the main change.
Got it, Mr. Pape. As far as professionals, Andy, can we just swear them all in at one time?
We can, that's
Let's
how
do
we
it.
usually roll. Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spell it, your last, starting with Mr. Zugner.
Louis Zugner, Z-U-E-G-N-E-R, professional engineer with Mid-Atlantic Engineering.
Scott Kennel, K-E-N-N-E-L, with McDonough and Ray Associates, traffic expert.
Melissa Rubb, R-U-B, licensed architect with BF Design and Associates.
Christine Capone, professional planner with Capone Consulting Group.
Your witnesses are sworn, Mr. Pape.
Okay, and then Mr. Pape, as one, we start off with one. They'll put the credentials on the record, please.
Surely. Mr. Louis Zugner is a professional engineer. He's responsible for the plans that are before you. I'll ask if he'll take a few moments to share with you his education and professional background.
Good evening, Louis Zugner. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Jersey as well as several other states. I'm the founding principal of the firm Mid-Atlantic Engineering, a graduate of Virginia Tech, been practicing for well over 20 years, testified for numerous zoning and planning boards across the state of New Jersey, including before this board.
We'll accept your credentials, Mr.
Thank
Zugner.
We'll- I think we'll approach this, we'll move with as much alacrity as we can, but we'll approach it methodically. I think it would be important if we could introduce the property through an aerial photograph, and then if we could narrow down to it, and then we'll introduce the use variance and site plan. So if you could take us through that.
Sure. We'll spend too much time on it, so I think the board, I'm sure, is relatively familiar with where we're located. This is first exhibit. I believe there's another one a little bit more zoomed out. This is overall aerial exhibit. It's today's date. I can see it. I can get closer. Great. So I don't know if this needs to have a mark.
I think it's been pre-marked as A35,
Okay.
at least that one up on the,
This is the same,
yeah,
correct?
on the board.
So this is just as a general orientation. You can see sort of the green strip running left to right across the aerial image. That's the north branch of the Metedeconk. A little bit hard to see because this is zoomed out. You can see both Ford and Kent roads, about the middle of the plan. And then in a white line, you can see the overall outline of the parcel for the yeshiva. Off to the right, up and down on this plan, might be off your screen there, is Route 9. Just sort of a general view of where we're talking about.
Lots 22, 23, 23.01, block 69.
Correct, and some portion of Lot 15.
We're all in the ARE-2 Agricultural Rural Estate Zone District.
That's correct.
Could you go to your next exhibit, take us a little closer to the property?
Mr. Zugner, what's outlined right now, does that include the additional property that you acquired?
It does, and I'll describe that.
Okay.
So if we could go to the next aerial image exhibit. Correct.
36?
Now, I believe here we're in a little bit of a different orientation, but this is zooming in from where we were previously. So you can see up and down along the right-hand side of this exhibit is, again, the north branch of the Metedeconk. You can see the county's new bridge pretty clearly, which is right along, would be the southwest corner of our property, our parcel. Kent Road is running left to right in this view.
And Ken, that's A34 for the record.
Thank you.
This white line is encompassing the total parcel. And so we had two, if you recall, residential lots along Kent Road in the existing condition. Those are homes to be removed. The existing school, you can see at the top of that picture. You can see its parking area and building. And then you can see a dashed line across the top. The dashed line is the current or existing property line. And then what we've acquired from an adjoining property give us more of a buffer space behind that existing building. That's the lands that have been acquired from Lot 15. It's about 20 feet in depth. It's about 9,000 total square feet. So overall, in terms of the application, if you take the merger of lots, the additional land, we do give right-of-way to Kent Road in this application. What was in the prior presentation 7.66 acres would now be 7.83 acres.
Mr. Zugner is saying acquired property. There's an agreement to acquire it. The adjustment of that lot line between the two properties requires this board's approval. So it has not transferred because it cannot transfer. There's an agreement for that piece to be sold to our client. I think an executive summary overview of the plan and an introduction of the plan should follow.
That would be great, and I'm going to switch to our colored rendering exhibit. This is simply labeled site rendering, again, has today's date.
This is A33?
Yeah.
This is, as typical of a colored rendering, a bit of an amalgam or assemblage of plans which we submitted, showing sort of in a little bit of visual color the application, including a number of different pieces that were on different plan sheets. Again, as orientation, this is the same as the aerial we were just looking at with Kent Road along the bottom of this plan. Again, I think we already mentioned we are in the ARE zone, ARE2. And as was discussed a little bit earlier, the sort of central core of this plan or this campus does remain very similar. But to run through a couple of items you would see on this plan, maybe some of the quick changes. The L-shaped building, which is to the bottom of this plan, this is what has been discussed as the new two-story building. We'll talk a little bit about how this building has changed. The top, along the back property line and where we have tried to add property, that's the existing building, and the plan is to make modifications to that building. The additional land is obviously creating more of a buffer, so beyond the 50 feet behind that building where we were less than that previously. The parking remains the same in numbers. There's a slight shift to where parking spaces sit, but essentially that same entryway and loop remains similar to what you'd seen before, with a main entryway into the new building out of that parking lot. You can see that within the middle of the property. There are some adjustments to where we did the trash enclosure, so it helps now in terms of pedestrian circulation. That was moved back, but still is in an appropriate location. As you come in and along that circular drive, we did maintain a significant loading area or drop-off area. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but that was on the prior plans. It's actually a little bit more significant in this plan in terms of length. That's sort of an overview in terms.
Let's go through each of the elements of a site plan. Let's go through them methodically. Let's start with grading. And what grading or regrading is required to achieve the plan that you're presenting to the board?
So it's a relatively flat property in terms of grade change in its existing condition. And the way it's proposed for grading is not dissimilar to what was shown to you before, of course, because in many ways the plan is similar. I think what's most critical to know, obviously we have wetlands and the north branch of the Matita-Conk is to the right on this plan, to the south. So in general, the topography is running towards the river there, and we maintain that. In the grading of this site, we do bring in a little bit of soil as fill material. That helps us create the proper drainage. And I think we discussed this at the prior hearings before this board. The main new building is elevated by a couple of feet from the existing grade. And this is important in terms of how we get the site to be graded properly. But again, it's a relatively flat site. There's not significant grading.
And if we could describe the stormwater management system that would be incorporated into the plan. And we begin by saying there is no stormwater management system that was approved with the Solomon Schechter School, and there is no stormwater management system on the site.
Correct.
So what do you propose?
So since the time we were here previously, rules for stormwater management and design have changed in a number of ways. But our approach is very similar. So we're achieving retention of water and water quality through three surface infiltration basins. We're not storing stormwater underground at this site. There are three basins. It ultimately all is discharged to the north branch of the Matita-Conk. We had spent quite a significant time with Mr. Cunliffe. We're not finished. I'm very confident we can get there in the end and satisfy all of his concerns.
And just to add clarity, to the board. So when they came in at the time of use variance, it was prior to the rule amendments in like March of, I think, 2021 when they became effective. They knew that that was in the pipeline at that time. It's just the rules hadn't been like fully perfected. So as part of the use variance, as far as like quantity control and like groundwater recharge, they demonstrated compliance with the rules in effect at the time of the use variance. It's just there's a couple added layers that have been, codified with the new stormwater rules. So we asked them to clarify that. There's a couple, details on the plans in the report that don't match as far as like inverts and bottom elevations. If it was off enough where we thought it was going to impact the site layout, we wouldn't have recommended they be here before you. I think from a quantity perspective, what they've shown is, in line with what we found acceptable at the time of the use variance. They're going to have to perfect it as part of any approval as resolution compliance, so.
Yes, and we've done a significant amount of soil work. We understand the soils here that was done previously, so that's part of the process.
Let's do circulation. I think that a very important element of circulation is our entrance driveway and the information, feedback that we received first from Chief Lewis when he was the fire chief, and now from your new fire chief. We met with your old fire chief twice and your new fire chief twice. So if you could do the circulation, starting with the driveway connection at Kent, pointing out the elements that were driven by Fire Chief Prochnow direction.
Certainly, and maybe touch also a little bit on our parking and loading. If we could go back to this, I don't know our numbers, but the site
33.
rendering, 33. Thank you. So our entrance from Kent Road into the site, that has not changed, and that doesn't change in terms of location from its existing site. But we bring in a boulevard road, and it's a full 18 feet to either side of that boulevard island, separated by a 4-foot island. This is important in terms of maintaining the idea of, since we have one entrance into this school, really either side of that boulevard island can function as an entrance in case of an emergency. As you come into the site, and we have referred to as a circle or circular motion there, all of our aisles within are 30 feet wide, and we maintain two-way circulation. This is always, in my mind, important. While the natural flow would seem to go counterclockwise here, I always believe that circulation with two-way flow is a better solution, and here we have plenty of width to do that. So you come around that circular loop, I mentioned this briefly before, you can see what would be the far left-hand side of the parking lot. There is a drop-off zone there, or a loading zone. It's striped, it's not for parking, it's for all of the types of uses that you would have as drop-off or delivery. So in a conservative sense, it's dimensioned as 109 feet along the sidewalk. It's actually much larger than this. If you took the full length, it's striped there from parking down to the entry of the building, it's about 150 feet. So we have more than sufficient space to bring in buses and unload multiple buses without even the idea of having them backed up out of that loading zone. At different times of the day, that could also be used for other types of delivery into the building. The parking spaces that we have on site, they're all 9-foot by 18-foot spaces. There are 39 proposed parking spaces. This is the same number as what we had presented before in terms of actual spaces. There's also 29 overflow spaces. So if you look towards the top of the plan or the existing building, you can see parking spaces on either side of the top aisle, which are shaded. Those would be spaces constructed of grass, reinforced grass, that could be used in the case of an event or an overflow need for additional parking.
And that's the same design and same location as the last time we presented to the board?
The parking is almost identical. There are a couple of spaces that have moved from, we'll call it the left half of the circle to the bottom half, just as the building has changed, but the numbers are the same and the intent is the same.
want to go back to the entrance driveway for a moment. You indicated it's the same driveway as previously presented. It's not the driveway that's there now.
It's not the driveway that's there now, although it's in a similar location. If you were driving along Kent Road, where you see the driveway now is where the new driveway will essentially be, but it's a reconstructed, different boulevard entrance.
The two 18-foot wide lanes and the 4-foot boulevard are offered to this board for their consideration. That's not there now.
That is not there now.
That's Chief Lewis and Chief Prochnow driven.
Correct. And then one last thing I would mention in terms of circulation, while it's not internal, the application does include curbing and shoulder work along our frontage. So it would be slightly wider, and there would be a curb along our frontage of our property.
The 30-foot driveway that's on the campus, the two-way 30-foot driveway, again, if you could confirm that that driveway is consistent with the fire department requirements.
Correct. So obviously working with your fire chief, but the 30-foot aisle width and the turning radiuses, the motions through that loop more than easily accommodate larger vehicles. They accommodate the fire trucks, any trash vehicles, school buses, anything that we would bring into the site. Circulation is well accommodated with the way this is designed.
Lighting. Let's discuss lighting. I'll remind the board that there was considerable discussion on lighting, and there was a request that we have a 3,000 Kelvin. That's a pretty soft type of light. And we begin by saying the commitment that we made last time remains a commitment that's made to this board.
Especially on the back of the building where the residents back up to it, correct?
There's no lighting on the back of the building other than the lighting that's required for security lights at doors.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, we have a question for you.
I'm ready.
Go ahead.
All right, so I'm looking at this plan. Where's the septic going?
So the existing septic field is to what would be the right or south of the existing building. That is being removed as part of this application. And the clear area you can see to the left of the existing building, that is where we would have space to construct a new septic system.
That septic system, though, is within our 50-foot buffer, is it not?
The septic system is not within the 50-foot buffer,
I mean-
50 feet from the property line.
Per the plans, it looks like it goes into the buffer. Because you do realize that no grading, no nothing can go into that buffer. So if you have the septic field touching the 50 feet, you're telling me there's no disturbance happening in that 50 feet?
The application is to keep the septic system out of the 50-foot buffer, and we can accomplish that. There was an element, and this was in the prior application, behind the new building, where we were looking to grade open space and then replant in the buffer. So we were trying to...
You
get some
cannot
more.
grade for a septic system in the buffer. You can grade to build your berm and to plant. That is it. If the stormwater management or the septic field or any part of your development modifies the buffer in any way, that's a variance.
We can accomplish the space. There's space for the septic field, and we can build it staying out of the 50-foot buffer.
So, and
Charlie, go ahead.
I just want to add some clarity to that. So, when you look at the applicant's plan, it shows expanding the existing septic disposal field to 98 by 85 feet. It's just a dashed line and a box on a plan. There's no details that we have for what the disposal field is, what the size of the tank is, or anything like that. The box that's shown on the plan looks like it complies with the 50-foot setback requirement, but there's no grading information that's provided. As the board knows, we've had, sometimes you get into soil test pits. If there's bad soils or there's high water table, then you could have a mounting system. There could be grading that's required with that. So I think, that's why it's probably in both Jen and my letters is there's not really much detail on the improvements in that area other than it's just shown as a box. So, that's give just more clarity. That's why we cited it.
And Charlie, is that box designed for the 185 students, or is it designed for the 380?
I don't know. I think as part of the use variance, we asked for like a fully engineered septic design to be presented to the board for our consideration. And, typically, on single-family residential and things like that, those are left to a condition of the approval. But I think as part of the use variance, there was a commitment from the applicant that would be provided to us for the board's review, and I don't know that we got that.
Mr. Pape?
The septic system design has not been completed. I've made a note, as I will during the evening, of items that are brought to our attention either by your staff or by the board. And at some point before we conclude, I'll respond to them, Mr. Chair. May we return to our presentation?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Sure. So lighting. I have pointed out that when we were here the last time, we have LED lighting. We continue to have LED lighting.
We do have LED lighting, and like you said, it is at the 3,000 Kelvin lower temperature.
Could you take a moment to just describe what 3,000 Kelvin lighting is? I mean, we're becoming more and more familiar with it, but let the record reflect what that is.
So with the LED lights, while there's not actually a temperature in the sense, there's a calculation showing temperature related to color. So if you were to have an LED light at, say, 5,000 Kelvin, it's a very harsh, bright white light. Beyond that, it's even blue. As you get to a lower temperature, like 3,000 Kelvin, which is essentially the lowest standard commercial bulb you can get, it is much more like existing site lighting, a little bit closer to a yellow color, which yellow doesn't sound nice, but in practice it actually is. It's just a softer color, and I'm sure many people have seen difference even in their own homes, where you get an LED bulb that's not a soft color, but bright white. It's stark.
If you could just describe the lighting plan that you have designed for the board's consideration.
So the site itself lends itself toward the goals of sort of capturing, maintaining our light footprint within the site, because we have a site where our parking, our outdoor facilities are within the middle of the site and surrounded by our buildings. We are lighting the site with poles. They're 19 of them. They're 18-foot tall poles. All of the light fixtures are the down-directed lights, so they don't throw, light pollution out in terms of seeing a bulb. They're down-directed, and there's no spillage off of our site.
I got mindful that when we were before the board the last time, there was at least one neighbor, I think maybe even two, that expressed concern with light leaving the property. Now, some of the light was concerned with light leaving the building, and we'll discuss that when Ms. Rubb is here, but light leaving the light fixtures. If you could give the board assurances of the steps that are taken to make certain that no light leaving your fixtures makes it onto our neighbor's property.
Right, so of course we go through a design of seeing foot candles on the ground, and it's essentially driven by the type of fixture. With the LED lights, we have far more control than we did in the past in terms of using little cell modules in the LED fixtures. They are shielded and down-directed, so there's a limited footprint from each pole. And again, because of the way this site sets itself up, the only area where our lighting is really getting to the property line for site layout is at the road and the entrance to our driveway.
Landscaping. Let's go through the landscaping. I had the privilege of walking the property with Ms. Spiro and gaining insight from Ms. Spiro. There are commitments that we will make to the board that are not yet on the plan that stem from the discussions that I had with Ms. Spiro. If you could take us through the landscaping plan as you've designed it, and then if you could advise the board where enhancements are going to be made.
So it's certainly very mindful of Ms. Spiro's comments and direction on landscaping. First, I guess what I would say is, like with any landscaping plan, in my mind, it breaks down into different areas. So the foundations of the buildings certainly get landscaping. That's part of the plan. The parking lot itself has trees around it as part of that process. What's probably most significant here are our buffers and perimeter landscaping. And it's unique in some ways on this property in that there are relatively significant existing trees around the perimeter of this property. I think there may be some quality elements to some of those existing areas, meaning that some of the undergrowth is probably not nice and needs to be cleaned out. Some of the trees and shrubs probably need to be removed, and then that needs to be supplemented. And quite frankly, I know we're going to need to work very thoroughly with Ms. Spiro on how we do that. And some of it probably, I think, is best handled even with notations and understandings in terms of numbers of buffer trees that will go in, and then determining in the field where those best locations are.
So, Louis, and if I could just ask to clarify, so this is the most current site plan that was provided to us. I think at the time of the use variance, there was testimony and a commitment that the 50-foot buffer along the northerly side property line and then also against the westerly front property line to Kent Road was going to be significantly landscaped within the full 50-foot width of the buffer. But what I'm looking at this plan here is you've got significant open space in between the existing vegetation, which is to be supplemented, but to the building area where there's no planting proposed. Can you provide some clarity on that for the board's perspective?
So I think the clarity is simple in that we need to add more landscaping in there. There's a couple of additional areas that from the plan that was submitted need additional plantings, including along Kent Road, the buffer you're talking about, and then also where we've added property behind the existing building. I think we're landscaped on our side, but then there's also space to the far side.
Mr. Pape, when we went out there, along Kent Road, it does show trees saved there, but it's not quite accurate what's in the field. There's sparse trees over there for most of that section, and many of them are not in good condition. So that whole Kent Road frontage will be a typical buffer planting. We don't have to just, find a gap to put a tree. That area has to be planted.
Okay.
If I may, when we were out on the property, Ms. Spiro identified chestnut trees. There were a number of chestnut trees, including saplings and a couple that were large. The goal is to try to preserve the healthy chestnut trees that are there because they're unique.
Well, they were black walnuts, I think. I think they were black walnut. They weren't chestnut.
I would believe Ms. Spiro.
Chestnut trees are extinct.
Yeah, they weren't chestnut trees.
I'm glad Ms. Spiro's here to correct me. Black walnut trees.
Those trees are in that first area to the left of the entrance,
Over. Closer to the
close to the
driveway.
driveway.
So I had made a note to memorialize the request that was made by Ms. Spiro. I got the tree wrong. I'm glad she's here to correct me.
No problem.
So if you could respond to both Charlie and to Ms. Spiro, those are the areas that will be further landscaped.
I have no dispute with what they've said, and our intent is to satisfy all of their concerns.
I think that there was also a comment letter that was issued, not a comment, there was a review letter that was issued by Ms. Spiro September 18th, and it includes some specific recommendations for planting. I'm going to ask if you could acknowledge receipt of that report, and then you agree that that report will be complied with.
Yes, and we will certainly follow up as well to make sure we're addressing those and anything else.
I think there's some,
Guys, it's really hard to hear you. I can barely hear you. I'm sure the people in the back can't hear a single word you're saying. I literally can't hear you at all, and I know that they are not being able to hear you either.
well, shall we turn it up? The next, I'm going to ask if you could identify the trash storage and trash removal plan that's part of the plan.
Certainly, I mentioned it briefly earlier. There's one exterior trash enclosure. It's between the two buildings. It's readily accessible for pickup by commercial vehicles. It's easily accessible from the buildings. This would have a masonry. It's just there to the left. Let's see that, yes. Would have a masonry wall enclosure, would be brick to match work done on the buildings, and then would be landscaping as a buffer around it. It's internal to the site, so it's, I think, a good location where it's not necessarily overly visible, but also is accessible.
There's a, water and sewer are not available, so well and septic. I'm going to ask if you could speak a little bit more about the septic system. Is that something that your firm will be responsible for designing?
So our firm will certainly oversee the process, and depending ultimately on the design and the permitting required, we might seek support. So there's discussion before about enhanced septic systems. We would seek support for that. If it's a septic system under 2,000 gallons per day, we're comfortable with that level of design.
Mr. Payne,
Yes.
if Mr. Zuckner can put on the record, what's the distance to the, sewer connection, if you were to go ahead and pursue that avenue?
You know that there's one in Ocean County in Lakewood, not available to us. We're outside of that franchise area, so that one we don't get to measure to. But do you know the location?
I have looked at this before, but I did not come prepared to answer that question. I don't know a distance.
We might get it during a break.
Okay.
And if you could identify the potable and firefighting water well that is proposed, it's just identify its location.
So behind the existing building, we've actually created more than 50 feet, and there are a couple of pieces of equipment behind that building, including a new, recently installed well. That well would need changes to the pump to accommodate all of the site, but the well itself would be sufficient. We have not yet gone through the overall application in terms of firefighting demand at the site, but it's likely that somewhere on the site we would need an underground vault for some water for a fire suppression system. But it would all be done through the well.
There are a number of reports that have been provided to us by the board. I think most significant are the reports that were issued by Ms. Farrow, which we just spoke to, the report that was issued by Mr. Cunliffe that dated December 30th, and the report that was generated by Ms. Beam on March 19th. Are there any elements of those reports that you would like to call out as having difficulty address, or are you prepared to advise the board that you can and you will work with those professionals to address their concerns?
So I'll answer your question. I just want to add one more site plan comment or note. There is a proposed monument sign for the site. It would be our boulevard entrance, and it would actually be on the north side of the entrance only, angled, so you would see it as you came from the south. And it would be a ground level monument sign. Dimensionally, it would meet all of your requirements. The literal letters and colors haven't been worked out yet, but it would be a compliant monument sign. It would have uplighting, and it would be at that corner of the entry drive. Going back to your review letter comment, I have reviewed all of them. I know it will take some work, but I'm confident we will, in the end, address any outstanding comments. There's nothing in there that we're trying to seek exception from.
There's a number of comments in the reports that speak to variances. The variance testimony will come from Ms. Cofone later in the evening. We acknowledge that there's variance relief required for what we're asking this board. It's not addressed by Mr. Zuckner. At this point, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my direct examination of Mr. Zuckner, and he is available for examination.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just one question, Ken, which is, we haven't identified this document. Well, I know what it is technically, but as a marking.
The actual site plan?
That's a sheet from the plan set that was filed. We can go to the title block, we can call it out.
So the application, the site plan application is A3?
This is the site plan.
No, I know.
On the screen, this is sheet 8 of 17 from the submitted site plan.
Okay. 2 sheets prepared by Mid-Atlantic. So A13 and 14 are architectural plans, but that's not what you're speaking of. I just don't, okay, so it's part of, right, Eileen is pointing out it's part of A6,
Very
for the record.
It's part of A6.
Thank you, Eileen.
Okay. All right, so Charlie?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, to go back to the septic, I just want to ask a couple of clarifying questions. So, Mr. Zugner, as part of the applicant's, I want to say maybe second submission, there was a septic, Howell Township, individual subsurface sewage disposal system permit with an expiration date of July 17, 2024. It had a Monmouth County Board of Health approval dated August 4th, 2023. And it said an approval for a disposal bed of 36 by 90 feet. I think the permit lists Mid-Atlantic Engineering Partners LLC as the engineer for that. Can you provide testimony regarding that approval and then what the number of students that approval was designed for?
Excuse me?
That was the old one.
No, there's, as part of this application and part of what we're discussing here in terms of use and numbers of students, the application before you with, I'm just looking for this number of students, at 167 students, that was the design that Charlie's referring to, and that is under the 2,000 gallons per day at 167 students.
So that 36 by 90 is for 167 students?
Correct.
So the one that's shown on the plan that is, apologize, I just want to make sure I cite the size correctly, 98 by 85, how many students can that handle?
I apologize, I've got some additional numbers here. That design is actually 180 students and 13 staff
The 36 by 90?
at 36 by 90.
So if 36 by 90 can handle 180 students, why does the site plan that's presented to us show a septic field in 98 by 85 feet?
So I think, again, as we've been talking about in terms of capacity for the school, we're trying to show an area that could support a larger field if necessary than what that, we identified an area, that design fits within that area.
So is it the applicant's representation that they're only constructing a 36 by 90 foot septic disposal field for this 180 students?
That would be what our application would seek, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's clear because,
Mr. Pape, you tracking?
Say that?
Are you tracking?
Yep.
Okay.
and that's under 2,000 gallons per day, right? Which is the limit that Board of Health, County Board of Health can approve?
That's correct.
Okay.
So are you gonna revise your plans to show the correct area?
I think that following the guidance of the chair, I've written down that we are to provide a copy of the permit and to provide a copy of the plans. We'll provide them to Eileen and to Charlotte.
I think maybe a little added to what Mrs. Beam's asking. So often when we do a site plan application, we would identify an area for septic. It's then sort of a separate plan and permit. But here, obviously based on what we're discussing, our plan needs to be updated and show your professionals literally the grading of the field, everything that's happening around it to assure that we're outside the 50-foot buffer, and we will certainly agree to do all of that.
You know, with,
Charlie, go ahead.
the point that I just want to make is for 180 students, it's a 90 by 36 foot disposal field. What's shown on the plan is 98 by 85. You know, that's more than double the footprint, plus or minus, of what was approved for 180 students. So I would anticipate that when they come back with a revised plan showing the smaller field and the grading, that the box is gonna be, roughly half the size. When it's shown double the size, it leads me to believe that the enrollment might be more than what's being presented to us. And like I said, the only point is, and this was a long discussion as part of the use variance testimony, is there's a different permit that's required when you go above 2,000 gallons per day, and, it's additional sewage demand. We do have the Matita-Conk River on the south side of the property here. There is environmentally restrictive areas associated with that. It's atypical for us to be seeing an application coming back in for almost half the scope of what was previously approved, and, I think that's what we're just
Mr.
asking
Cunliffe,
questions about.
you are a great steward of our natural resources and our water management.
Good job, Charlie.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Martin. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of on this 180 figure, but what happens when we do have these extra events where you're going to have a lot more people there? Is that going to, that small window, could that be an issue?
I lived in Millstone Township for 45 years, and we were on a septic system. I had a Christmas party. I pumped the day before, and I pumped the day after. But that's just a practical answer. What's the real answer?
Well, but I appreciate your question. The way a septic system is designed or permitted is based on calculation of students and space in the building. And you would presume that it's also assuming that there are events from time to time in the building, and one event would not necessarily trigger or overload the septic system if it's functioning properly. Just like in your home is designed based on a number of bedrooms, and if you have a holiday party and have all your friends and cousins over, you haven't violated anything, and your septic should still be able to support that one night.
Yeah, we're talking, you're talking kind of an example as families, but I think certain events you may, or extra activities, I think we're talking more than just, that's, I just want to be sure on this, because, that is a concern.
Mr. Chair, this is a use variance application, and I think there's so many questions regarding the septic, the design, the impact to the buffer, how big the area is, that I almost feel like we need that information in advance of being asked to act on the application, because there is a component which Ms. Cafone, I know she's here and excellent at what she does, but she has to demonstrate the negative criteria, which is no negative impact to surrounding land uses, and an undersized septic system could potentially present a negative impact on surrounding land uses. I would suggest, and it's up to you as a board, that the applicant clean this up and before they come back to us and ask us to act on the application, because this is a question mark associated with a negative criteria. And I don't mean to speak for Ms. Cafone, because obviously she knows what she's doing, but I don't know how she can address the negative criteria when we don't have the requisite information in order for us to either opine one way or the other. And I don't even know if she has the information, but I'm just saying, there's so many open-ended questions about the design of the septic that I feel like we should get more detailed information about this before the board is put in any position to act on the application.
Ms. Beam, I am tracking, and I concur, and that's where I was going, but you got there before I did. Thank you.
That's why I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Hughes has a question?
Yeah, to Charlie or Jen. I know when we're talking about houses and mounded systems versus, non-mounded, does that have any effect on beyond residential on this particular? If it's mounded, does it make a difference?
So, before you answer, the only thing I would say is that the way it's designed on the plan is literally the limit of the septic hits the buffer. So if it's mounded and has to be graded, and I think, Charlie, you did discuss that earlier, there's a potential that the grading were to impact the buffer. So that would be a variance. So it does have the potential to create relief. I'm not suggesting that it does need to be mounded. I'm just saying we don't know, and we don't have the grading plan associated with the septic design to determine it. And I would just say to the board, we have sent residents home to give us more detailed information on septic systems because we don't have the requisite information. So it's not,
Absolutely,
this is not a specific concern related to this application. We have sent single-family homeowners home to give us more detailed information on how they're going to lay out their septic design and whether that impacts variance relief or not.
Well, I also know when we have a home with it mounded in the front, we try to avoid that for.
Agreed.
My question is, would that have any effect in your mind on this? And this is not in the front yard. I'm just trying to get an idea of what your feelings are on if it was to be mounded.
Other than the potential grading in the buffer, from my perspective on where this is located, no.
Okay.
But you may have a different answer.
Well, I mean, the topography of the site, if anyone's driven by the site, you can see the site driveway that's existing in the Solomon Schechter School goes up quite considerably. So you're putting a septic system on an elevated site. You know, septic system designs they function on the effluent kind of percolating through the subsoils. You know, it goes vertically, but some of it also does go horizontally. So if it's elevated above grade to mound, that creates a possibility that it further disperses horizontally. I know, if I recall correctly, when we were here as part of the use variance, I believe one of the adjoiners had some questions and concerns regarding the septic design and what was gonna ultimately, what it was gonna look like, what was the capacity and everything like that. You know, obviously we haven't gotten to public yet, but, you know, you've heard our concerns from a professional perspective regarding the septic system and the demand, so.
That's right, Charlie.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Scottson?
No, I was just gonna, my only, I mean, thank you, because I was thinking exactly the same thing. It's like, there's just so many unknown questions, and, you know, it would be one thing, if I'm out of line in saying this, please stop me, but if, it would be one thing if, you know, with the 188 or what the number, and then, yes, there is a potential for growth, then perhaps we should know that, if there's maybe some room for growth. Number two is with the septic, you know, that's important because if it's not set up properly, besides the buffer, it's running into the backyard of 278 Ford Road. So that's a problem, potentially, if there's an issue. So that's why these things have to be discussed in more detail for us to be able to understand it better.
So, Mr. Zugner, you know, how far is the closest connection? And do we need an easement to get there, right? The sewer would solve a lot of that problem, is what I'm saying.
I hear you. I'll have to do a little research here and get you an answer.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else? Questions? We're good? John?
So, and I just want to give clarity too, right? So if you're not in a sewer service area, and sewer is a great distance away, right? There's nothing to say that you can't get approvals from the Board of Health or from DEP, Egyptian permit for the septic system. I think the point that we're just making as a board is there's a line in the sand between 2,000 gallons or less. It's Board of Health. Above that, it's a more enhanced system that requires more regulatory permits as opposed to just, you know, one for 2,000 gallons.
And with the Matita right there, Charlie, I agree. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so Mr. Pape, we're going to continue to hear testimony, I
Yeah,
guess.
fine.
But we probably won't hear Ms. Cofone until such time, you know.
Ms. Coffone's going to get the night off, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman. Although I don't want her to leave because her listening is so valuable to us tomorrow.
okay.
If Mr. Zugner will remain, will the public cross-examination occur later this evening, not after each witness?
What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to open it now for Mr. Zugner, or do you want to go ahead and go through a further testimony and then open it?
I don't know, that's, weren't we supposed to be doing it per professional? I think that's what
Is that what you would like to do? Okay.
But I would suggest that questions relate specifically to.
Oh, absolutely.
And not to anything that hasn't.
Correct. Okay, so can we have a motion to open the public for the engineer only?
Motion to open.
We got a motion, we got a second, okay. All in favor? Aye. All right, Eileen, we're going to open up the public just for the engineer.
The board will now open up the public for the engineering questions. If you'd like to come up, state your name and your home address.
So this is for the public. Anybody that wants to ask a question of the board of the engineer. Vice? Mr. Bear? Hi, Mr. Bear?
Yes, hi. Can you just give us your name, please?
Yes, Ruby Wang, W-A-N-G.
Okay, Ms. Wang, do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Ms. Wang is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
May I ask that Ms. Wang share with us her address?
337 Ford Road.
Thank you.
This is questions just for the engineer.
Yes, I know that there's been a lot of uncertainty with regards to this because there's similarities to what they have presented before, but there's quite a lot of differences as well that we need to address and understand. My concern is with regards to the septic. They don't know how many students they're going to really be building for. And they say that there's no intent for growth, but we know that that never really happens with the area that we're in right now. So they really need to understand and plan accordingly and design to the number of students. Now also, this application has brought in lots 22 and 23 with the new additional lots, hence the new two-story building. How many students are that going to be, occupying and entertaining?
I don't mean to be rude. This is not a question that is for the engineer.
Well, it's
This
with
is not
regards to the
testimony
septic,
that has
though.
been presented yet for examination. It does follow.
But with regards to the septic, I mean,
How
if
about you put it in the form of a question?
we need to understand how many students are, and therefore you need to then also properly present a septic design. You're saying you want to relocate the septic to a new location. We don't know and understand how is that designed and how is that accommodating the school that you're planning to build.
Mr. Zugner?
So, again, I think we've had some discussion on it, but we're removing the existing septic, and we are building a new septic system. And as the professionals have asked, they'd like to see more of the final design and grading of where that will go, which we'll need to provide to them. But as you can see on this screen here, that is where the proposed septic system would go.
So therefore, will you be presenting a new application and design to address this and also addressing the number of students for the school?
There won't be a new application. There will be revisions to the plan to include all of the work that Mr. Zugner's firm did with regard to the septic system. And the number of students has been testified to and will be testified during other witnesses. And the commitment that the applicant has made is the cap on that number of students, which is now part of the record.
You also mentioned about the gymnasium in the back, proposed or addition to it. And how many students will be accommodating that facility? And also the events, even though you say you limit to 3 events for the year, there are additional events. Will there be games that they be hosting, other schools,
And
programs?
this is not testimony that was provided by the engineer. It will come.
We'll come to that, yes.
It's all part of my concern with regards to the septic, and I mean, I believe they should really put in a new application and prepare the design put forth.
Ms. Wang, we're not going to vote on this application until such time that we see the additional plans coming forward and we examine them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and Mr. Chair, I just want to note,
ahead.
so we asked questions about this at the time of the use variance, about whether there was like games from other schools and things like that, and whether there's open gyms, things like that. And I think there was representations made on the record under the prior use variance approval that it would just be for the students at this school. There wasn't like regional tournaments or like competition or anything like that. So I didn't ask it because we're at the engineer now. This is something more so with the operations. But, a lot of these things were testified to, and I think in both mine and Jen's letter, it's please confirm that there's no change to these. We're hitting on the big ones that there was a clear night and day difference from the prior use variance approval. But when we get to the appropriate parties, we will ask additional clarifying questions.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, I do think that there needs to be operational testimony because, I agree with Charlie, there was a lot of testimony, but you, as a board, did not allow them to increase the height of the building in the gymnasium area, so that may have limited what was going on in there, and now we're proposing to increase the height in that area. And so my guess, and I don't know because we haven't heard any operational testimony, is that the activities in that space may change now that there's increased height. So,
Once we hear from the architect, then we'll,
well, that's not architectural testimony. The architect, in fairness, was given a program saying increase the height of the building and design it. She's not responsible to provide us with testimony as to how they plan on using it. There needs to be some testimony from the school in order for us to understand why, even though the last time we said do not increase the height of the building, that they're now coming back to increase the height of the building.
Jen, I agree, we need operational testimony.
100%.
But we need to see what we're asking.
Oh, I agree,
against.
but I think
That's why, okay.
I think the operations goes beyond just the gym. So I think that, there needs to be some kind of operational testimony provided regarding why we anticipate half the number of students that was approved for before, why the building is the size that it is, given the fact that you had an approval for 380 students, now you're saying 180 students. So there needs to be significant testimony regarding what is happening here in order for the board and the public to understand what is actually being asked for. And I don't think we've gotten there yet.
No, we've
So-
only
so Mr.
presented
Pate, go
one
ahead.
witness, but yes, we will have operations testimony.
We'll have to
Yes, you'll
have
recall, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you'll recall Jack Mandelbaum spoke on behalf, and I anticipate that Mr. Mandelbaum will be the person who speaks again. He is the one most familiar with all of the operations. But the applicant is going to ask the board to allow the increase of the building's height. That increase is 2 feet 10 inches. 2 feet 10 inches is the additional height that we're going to ask the board. And Ms. Beam just said, how do we do that? We certainly have to earn it with the testimony of all the witnesses, but that was the reason that we went out and asked if our neighbor would sell us additional properties. Right now, we have a building that's almost on the property line, but with additional lands, we have a full 50 feet away from our neighbor. And that'll be part of what we present to you in support of requesting lifting that building 2 feet 10 inches. And actually, only half of the building, 2 feet 10 inches.
Okay. So,
Yeah, and I just want to make one more comment. So, Mr. Zugner obviously prepared the site plan. We had some comments in there about like the new EV charging laws and stuff like that. Is Mr. Kennel prepared to answer those questions? To give the board context, when this got approved at the use variance level, it was before the state enacted the new EV charging laws. Anything that comes in after that time for amended preliminary and final an original application or amended application for preliminary and final site plan has to comply with the EV charging requirements. Is that something that you're going to testify to, or is it something that Mr.?
I think it's a good point that you brought up, and I think from the prior time when you were here to this, it was possibly something that we didn't include, Mr. Cunliffe did raise, and it's something we need to change. I don't know the exact number, I believe it would be 2 for the 39, but we have to, is that right? I think
Yeah,
so.
that's what I have in my letter, yep.
We would have to add those into the parking, so we would need an EV charger and EV charging station.
so, Mr. Pate,
Yes,
do you want to just carry?
I would rather present, there's considerable other information I think we can share that the board, I think you'd be very interested in the architect's testimony.
Jen, we're good, we're going to hear the architect.
Okay.
We're going to take a 10-minute break as well. Okay? We got to close public, yes. Thank you, Mark. Motion to close. Have a second?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, somebody else wants to talk.
Oh, okay.
Better come up. Speak now.
My father,
Andy.
very funny.
I'm sorry, state your name, please,
My name is David Cherry,
and your address.
311 Ford Road.
Okay, Mr. Sherry, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. So I
David
understand
Sherry
this,
is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
I understand this question is just for the engineer. So I do have a couple questions. You did mention that you would be installing a quantity of 19 18-foot electrical poles for lighting. You did mention the warmth of those lights. Do you happen to have information on how many lumens those lights will output?
I could obtain that for you, but I don't off the top of my head know the total lumens.
Okay, because my concern is there would be a lot of light from some poles that large, especially considering it's a residential neighborhood for the most part, and all the houses are very low. My next question is, you mentioned that there would be a quantity of 39 parking spaces with the possibility of 29 overflow, which you said would be parked, if I'm not mistaken, on a grassy area. My concern there is, vehicles leak oil, obviously being located directly next to the Metaconk. I would be concerned about runoff from those vehicles entering the Metaconk. Is there any plan for mitigating waste from those vehicles, or is that just the plan if there's an event to park those vehicles on that grassy area? And you mentioned the original count of 190 students, which is now up to 380. It seems that's not clear, but it seems...
380.
It was 380, and now it's reduced to 190. So even at that reduced count, 39 parking spaces for seemingly 190 students seems like an insufficient amount of parking. Is there any plan to mitigate traffic in the area? I see that you have a nice driveway entering the property, but the Ford and Kent intersection is very busy as it is. And my concern would be additional traffic in that area. Is there any plan to mitigate that traffic?
I wouldn't say mitigate the traffic. I would point out that none of the students have cars. None of the graduate students have cars. None of the undergraduate students have cars. None of the students are permitted to bring a car to the campus. And that was a commitment that was made previously, and it's renewed, that the students are almost exclusively brought to the campus by buses, and that is a commitment that we'll make. The statement that we made was that there is the occasional parent who brings a child, but that was the exception and not the rule. All of those statements that were made are brought forward this evening as part of this application.
I think then my follow-up question then would be what the requirement is for such a large parking area. I see that one of the requested variances is a maximum lot coverage of 26%, where everybody in an agriculture area is limited to 15% coverage. So I'm just trying to understand where that lot coverage comes from. It seems to me that perhaps there might be something additional that you guys are trying to seek with that lot coverage. But could you clarify then what the parking would be used for if the majority of students would be arriving by bus? Is it just for these larger events?
So, and again, not to throw everything back to what we talked about before, there was some extensive discussion on the use, the building, and how we came to that parking calculation. And to some extent, what we tried to do was meet the parking requirement, but not have an excessive amount of parking. And that's how we got to the overflow parking, where those spaces would be grass spaces. In these 3 times a year where there's a need for more parking in an event, we would have it. And the expectation is that of the 39 spaces, that they would be, certainly some of them would be used daily, but that it would not be a full parking lot, that approximately 12 staff any one time on site. There could be a few other visitors or people. The students don't have cars, but the 39 meets the parking requirement.
Understood. I would like something clarified. Earlier you had mentioned, or somebody had mentioned, that the existing septic system was located on the south side of the property. The diagram shows it currently on the north side of the property, and it appears that they're expanding the existing septic field. I understand that the details of the septic field somehow have not been figured out in the past 2 years, but I question where the current septic system is. Is it on the south side, or is it as shown?
So to some degree, both. There were 2 existing systems. One was a replacement. Where you're referring to, there was a septic system there where the new one would go. There's also an operational one that's south of the building. It's actually into the wetlands buffer. That's why we're removing that one. It was permitted some long time ago. And that's the one that's going to be removed, and that's restored as buffer to the Matiticon.
Okay. And has any study been done on any potential runoff from the proposed new septic system into the Metaconk? Or is there any plans to do any?
So if we design the system and get approval as we can at the 180 students from the County Board of Health, that, based on its flow numbers, does not require an off-site or extensive study of nitrates or dilution models.
Now, though that may be true, what I'm struggling to understand is the septic system proposed is for this 180 students. It seems to me that the original proposed plans was reduced in size and capacity in order to remain under that 2,000 gallons per day requirement. Now, if the system will be at capacity with the proposed number of students, then in my mind, that leaves no excess for any planned event that might, exceed the population beyond the 180 students. So I'm just struggling to understand. Obviously, it was mentioned, hey, when people come over to my house, I can clear my septic the day before. But in this case, we're talking about a much larger facility, and I think that the magnitude of the issue should not be, lessened to that degree of, hey, I'm having family over. This is a very big concern. Metaconk is a protected waterway, as well as just, being in a residential area. That's a very big concern of me.
The only comment that I can make is that the septic system that is now adjacent to the Matiticon, that septic system that is adjacent to the Matiticon has been servicing for a very long period of time the same population that we're asking this board to consider as the population going forward. And we're going to remove it from the buffer area alongside the Matiticon, and we're going to move it to the opposite side of the building. We're going to do so with modern permits and not relying on a permit that was granted some 50 or 60 years ago.
I respect that you're going to not use the permit that was some 50 to 60 years ago, but your statement is conflicting in that you're saying that the existing system has the capacity for the current number of students, which I don't know if it was mentioned, but what is the current number of students? And if we're increasing to that 180, I'm guessing that the system that's currently in place is not capable of supporting that 180 students?
The number of students that are there and have been there for the past 10 years has been static.
Mm-hmm.
It has been, and it's the same number that we're asking that you allow us to go forward with. There's no growth.
So it's 180, there is no increase?
That's correct.
If that's the case, then why is there a requirement for a new septic system? I do have to go back to my neighbors whose concern was that if the systems in place were sufficient for the current number of students, then I'd understand why there would be a proposed plan to increase the number, the septic size. It seems to me that something is amiss. Either the proposed size of the building is for significantly more than 180 students, or the septic system currently in place is not capable of supporting the current student population, which would be a different concern that I'm sure my neighbors would like to have addressed if the current system in place is not capable of meeting the demand currently at the building.
So two elements. One, as I mentioned, the existing septic is in a wetland buffer. Now, it was approved at the time, but we do need NJDEP permits as part of this application. So DEP is going to say, move the septic system. Secondarily, I think what Mr. Pape was referring to is that existing system has functioned, has not failed. It has supported the school, but it is not large enough in its current configuration for a new building and new construction. We need to build a septic that is now compliant, which would mean it gets larger.
So I think you've answered my question then. The current system in place, which you're claiming is capable of supporting the 180 students, will not be large enough for the planned expansion, but the planned expansion is requiring a larger septic system. So again, it seems to me like we're not being clear about the actual number of students that this facility will serve.
We'll say it as many times as necessary, and we'll find as many ways of backing it up. The student population and the staff population are not expanding.
No further questions.
Thank you. Anyone else from public? Andy?
Mark Parisi, 2 Castle Court.
Mr. Parisi, swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Mr. Parisi is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
I came in a little bit late, so I may have missed any conversation about the letter of interpretation. Was there any discussion about that? Because I know that,
We did not discuss that.
okay, so I guess
I can give you a little bit of information if you'd like.
well, I had read that in one of the documents from the Monmouth County Board of Health that it expired in September, so I just wanted to ask some questions about what's going on with that.
So it didn't actually expire. This goes all the way back to COVID. It was issued in September of 2018, I believe, and then tolled through the COVID time period. So it still is valid, but we're in the process of submitting the extension request.
Okay, that was my question, just
That's
whether or
great.
not we had a valid LOI or not.
So, and just to clarify, it's in our letter, so they do show on the plans that it's, I think, 100, and Mr. Zugner can clarify if I'm correctly, is it 150-foot or a 50-foot buffer associated with that wetlands that you have on the property?
I think there's a combination. Off the Matita there's a 300-foot buffer,
That's riparian, right?
right?
Okay,
But
but-
the wetlands is 150 foot.
Yes, and you're showing, so if the LOI does lapse prior to the applicant, getting approval from the board, right, and does not covered by any COVID permit extension, they would have to revalidate that. You're in the process of getting a TAW permit from DEP for the,
Correct, yes.
so, and to give the board's clarity, and we discussed this when this came in for the use variance, so the driveway expansion that you're proposing is largely within the same footprint of where the existing driveway is, and where you are expanding, you're expanding northerly from the wetlands?
Away from the Matita
Okay, so any approval by this body is conditioned on any outside agency approval. That includes making sure that the LOI is still valid, and then obviously they got to get any TAW or any other DEP permits that are required as a condition of approval,
Absolutely.
so.
Mr. Parisi?
All right, thank you, guys.
You're good?
Yeah, so I mean, wouldn't it stand to reason that if you have to go back to the DEP and there's any concern that the septic system that you've proposed may exceed the 2,000 gallons per day, because the original plans in 2021 talked about a 5,600 gallon per day system, that you would just go and get the necessary approvals in the event that your system is going to exceed the 2,000 gallons?
The permitting process for wetlands or buffers, letter of interpretation, is a different DEP department than you would make application to for a septic system design. So they're not correlated while they're both in Trenton. They would be separate permits.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else from public?
Motion to close.
We got a motion to close. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Eileen, we're closing for public.
Board is now closed to the public.
Eileen, we'd like to take 10 minutes, please.
The board will now take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 8:52 p.m.
Thank you. Eileen, the board is back. We will continue.
The meeting will now reconvene.
So, Mr. Pape,
Yes, sir.
you know, we go back to when we first had the concept, 380 students. We're down to 190. You stayed with the 380. The septic is still an issue, one way or the other. There's got a lot more testimony needs to be heard. In view of the conundrum of operational testimony and the septic and so forth, you know, I would ask if you have the pleasure of maybe wanting to carry until we get this squared away, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I can see the importance of the septic system design being before the board for a thorough examination. And I've shared it with my clients. We recognize it. And it's achievable, so we shouldn't be trying to avoid it. I just asked your secretary, well, when is the first opportunity that we can return? And it happens to be July 8th. Your agenda is a very full agenda. We'll accept the July 8th, but I would also ask if the board would consider sometime this spring to scheduling a special meeting where we can break this out and present it to the board for your consideration.
Wow. Andy?
Well, it's something legally you can do if you could.
We would have to
Together
add a
or-
date then, just for this particular
Yeah.
application. So, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but Eileen?
I can give you the dates that we do have meetings, and you guys can speak about it, but the next available date would be July.
No, Eileen, the chairman's asking about dates for a special, not dates that not our regular meeting.
I-
So you have council meetings and you have planning board meetings here, right? So those nights.
I would imagine that to be a Monday,
So it would probably be a Monday night. Yeah, an off Monday that
Mr.
we
Chair,
don't.
I have meetings, unless it's the fifth Monday of the month, which I know that there's a fifth week in May.
I was just going to say that
Oh, there's a fifth meeting in April. If it's the first through the fourth week of a month, I have meetings every Monday.
The 29th of April is the fifth. Oh, that's Passover.
The Passover.
not, that's the week before.
The 20, April 29th? Oh, you're right, you're right.
That's the week
sorry.
before, yes.
You are right.
Mr. Pape, can you be ready by April 29th?
Yeah.
That may be an issue for the applicant.
It's not a big,
I'm told that is part of,
Might
it is part of Passover.
oh, it is, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Is there a fifth Monday in May?
No.
No.
July has a 5th.
Well, we already have July.
July.
We already said July
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a full agenda on July 8th, you're saying.
No, July 8th, your secretary tells us we'd be at the top of the agenda, we could have the evening. We accept July 8th. I did want to explore with you whether there was an earlier possibility. But it seems that we have. We'll take the July 8th date, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Eileen?
The application could be carried till July 8th. Was that with or without notice, Mr. Pape?
We're in the middle of the presentation. We'd ask that it be without further notice and it be so announced.
I will also need an extension of time.
On the record, the applicant grants an extension of time through the end of August 2024, and we'll follow it with a letter.
Okay. So, case number BA 19-23SP, Yeshivas and Mikhatora, Inc. This application is going to be carried until July 8th with no further notice and an extension of time to the end of August.
Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Pape. Eileen, any other business?
No business for tonight.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We got a second? All in favor? Aye. Eileen, we're adjourned.
Meeting has been adjourned.
Thank you, Eileen.